Why is he so cold now?
Because warmth almost killed him.
There was a time I would have given you the last good thing in me and called it love. The last hour of my day, the last dollar in my pocket, the last clean piece of trust I had left. I gave people access to parts of me they had never earned. And I did it because I thought that was what good men did. I thought if I stayed patient long enough, people would eventually become honest. If I forgave enough, they would eventually stop hurting me. If I kept showing up, they would finally understand the cost of disappearing. If I loved hard enough, somebody would look at what I was giving and say, "Don't waste this, protect it." Nobody said that. They took the warmth and called it normal. They stood close enough to feel the fire, but never close enough to notice I was burning alive to keep them warm. That was my mistake. I thought being needed meant being loved. I thought being useful meant being valued. I thought the people who kept coming back were returning because they cared. Some of them were only cold. And I was the nearest fire. So they came when they needed comfort, when they needed loyalty, when they needed someone to answer at 2 in the morning, when they needed forgiveness they had not earned, when they needed a place to put the weight they were too weak to carry themselves. And I carried it. God, I carried everything. I carried conversations that should have ended years earlier. I carried people who had already decided they would never carry me. I carried promises after the people who made them had forgotten what they said. I carried guilt that did not belong to me, because I was terrified of becoming the kind of man who could walk away. So I stayed, and every time I stayed, something inside me got colder. Not all at once. That is the part nobody understands.
Men like me do not become cold in one night. We freeze by degrees. One disappointment, one betrayal, one unanswered message, one apology that arrives only because someone needs access again. One more time being told, you're overthinking it, when your instincts are screaming that something is wrong.
One more time watching somebody choose everyone else, and then return to you when the room gets empty. A man can survive a lot of things. What kills him is repetition. The same knife in a different hand, the same lie in a different voice, the same ending wearing a new face. After a while, you stop calling it bad luck. You start calling it a pattern. And patterns change men. They changed me. I remember the version of me that wanted explanations. He needed to know why. Why did you do it? Why did you lie? Why did you leave? Why was I good enough to use but never good enough to choose? Why did you ask for my heart if you already knew you were going to treat it like something disposable? I asked questions because I thought answers would heal me. They didn't. Most people never give you the truth anyway. They give you whatever version allows them to sleep at night. And one day I stopped asking. That was the first sign the warmth was dying. Not when I got angry. Anger is still warm. Anger still cares. Anger still believes something can be repaired. The real cold begins when you stop needing to be understood. When the message comes in, and you do not feel your stomach drop anymore. When the name appears on the screen, and your pulse stays exactly where it was. When the person who used to control your entire emotional weather walks into the room, and suddenly, they are just a person. No thunder, no fire, no trembling, nothing. That silence scared me at first. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought maybe they had finally destroyed the best part. Maybe all the betrayal had worked. Maybe all the nights had turned me into exactly what I used to fear becoming. Then I understood. I was not becoming empty. I was becoming unavailable to chaos. There is a difference. Cold is not always cruelty. Sometimes cold is what happens when a man finally stops touching the same stove to prove he has a heart. Sometimes it is wisdom after the funeral of innocence. You call it distance. I call it the space required to hear myself think. You call it heartless. I call it refusing to hand my heartbeat to someone who has already proven they like the sound of it breaking. You call it pride. I call it the day I stopped negotiating with people who only respected me when I was leaving. I became cold because warmth almost killed me. Because I kept giving chances until chances became permission. Because I kept confusing forgiveness with access. Because I kept believing people were sorry when what they really missed was the version of me that let them do whatever they wanted without consequences. That version is gone. I buried him quietly. No funeral. No speeches. No final conversation. He died somewhere between I understand and it's okay when neither one was true. He died every time I swallowed what I should have said because I did not want to lose somebody who had already made peace with losing me. He died in rooms where I was surrounded and still completely alone. He died waiting for the bare minimum from people I would have crossed fire for. Eventually there was nothing left to bury, only a lesson, and the lesson had one sentence. Stop offering warmth to people who keep bringing winter into your life. So I did. I stopped explaining my silence. I stopped defending my boundaries. I stopped writing paragraphs to people committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped believing effort should be begged for. I stopped asking people to become the person they already pretended to be when they wanted something from me. And suddenly I looked cruel. Isn't that interesting? When I had no boundaries, I was a good man. When I absorbed every insult, every absence, every betrayal, I was mature. When I stayed quiet so other people could stay comfortable, I was understanding. But the moment I said no, I changed. The moment I walked away, I became difficult. The moment I stopped giving unlimited access to my time, my mind, my loyalty, my peace, suddenly everyone had a story about how cold I had become. Good. Let them tell it. Make me the villain if it helps you avoid admitting why I had to become one in your story. I know what happened. I was there. I remember every night I tried to talk myself out of what my instincts already knew. I remember defending people who would not have defended me in an empty room. I remember saying, they're just going through something, as if pain gives people permission to turn you into collateral damage. I remember making excuses for behavior that was slowly teaching me to hate myself. That is what nearly killed me. Not them. Me. The version of me that kept returning. The version of me that thought loyalty meant staying no matter how expensive staying became. The version of me that believed walking away made him weak. He was wrong. Sometimes walking away is the first violent act of self-respect a man ever learns. Not violence against them. Violence against the pattern. Against the addiction to being chosen. Against the desperate little voice that says, maybe this time they'll mean it. I had to kill that voice, because that voice had nearly buried me. And when it finally went quiet, the world changed. I started seeing people clearly, not through hope, not through history, not through potential, through patterns. What do you do when nobody is watching? What do you do after you apologize? What do you do when you no longer need anything from me? Who are you when there is nothing to gain? That is who I started believing. Not the words, the pattern. People can rehearse words. Patterns are honest. So now I watch. I listen less to promises and more to repetition. I do not care how beautiful the apology sounds if the behavior returns wearing the same shoes.
I didn't give you permission to leave the temple grounds, initiate.
I do not care how much someone says they love me if peace disappears every time they enter the room. I do not care how long I have known you. Time does not turn poison into water. History is not a contract. Memories are not chains. And love, real love, does not require a man to continuously abandon himself to prove it exists. That lesson cost me years. It cost me sleep. It cost me pieces of myself I will never get back. But I paid for it, so I am going to use it. That is what people do not understand about a man after he has paid too much for wisdom. He stops giving it away cheaply. He becomes selective, harder to reach, harder to impress, harder to manipulate. He stops falling in love with words. He stops being moved by tears that arrive only after consequences. He stops rushing to rescue people from fires they keep setting themselves. And people hate that version, because warmth is convenient. A warm man can be guilted. A warm man can be pulled back with memories. A warm man can be controlled through empathy.
Tell him you are hurting, and he forgets what you did to him. Tell him you miss him, and he forgets why he left. Tell him you have changed, and he starts rebuilding the bridge before he checks whether you are still carrying matches. I know, because I was that man.
I would have reopened every door if you knocked with the right sadness in your eyes. Not anymore. Now I remember. Cold remembers. That is its power. Warmth wanted the good days back. Cold remembers what the good days cost. Warmth heard, I need you. Cold asks, where were you when I needed you? Warmth said, maybe they didn't mean it. Cold says, intent does not erase impact. Warmth wanted closure. Cold became closure. And somewhere along the way, I realized something that changed everything. The cold was never the enemy. The cold was the guard standing outside the last warm room inside me. Because I still have one. That is the secret. I am not empty. I did not lose the ability to care. I did not become stone. Stone feels nothing. I feel everything. That is why the walls are so high. You do not build a fortress around something worthless. You build it around what survived. There is still loyalty in me, but it is no longer free. There is still love in me, but it is no longer blind. There is still forgiveness in me, but forgiveness no longer comes with a key to the front door. There is still kindness, but kindness is not surrender. There is still warmth, but you will earn your place near it. That is what changed. Before, I gave people the fire first and waited to see whether they would burn the house down. Now I watch what they do in the cold. I watch how they behave when I am not useful, when I am tired, when I say no, when I cannot rescue them, when I disagree, when I choose myself. That is where character reveals itself. Not in the beginning. Everybody is warm in the beginning. People are generous when access is new. They are attentive before they are comfortable. They are loyal before loyalty costs them anything. I learned to stop judging people by how they arrive. I judge them by how they behave after they think I will never leave. That is where the truth lives, and the truth made me cold, not bitter. Bitter men are still arguing with the past. I am not arguing anymore. I do not need revenge. Revenge is another form of attachment. It means you are still building your day around someone who already took enough of your life. No, my revenge is absence. My revenge is peace. My revenge is becoming impossible to disturb. It is sleeping without waiting for a notification. It is hearing your name and feeling nothing tighten in my chest. It is watching the door you once controlled close from my side. Quietly, permanently. No final speech, no explosion, no begging you to understand what you did. I understand. That is enough. The cold taught me that every battle does not deserve noise. Some victories sound like silence.
Some victories look like a man who could respond and chooses not to. A man who could go back and does not. A man who could destroy someone with the truth and decides his peace is more valuable than being proven right. That is control.
And control is colder than rage will ever be. Rage is a fire everyone can see. Control is winter. It does not announce itself. It simply arrives, and suddenly nothing grows where disrespect used to live. That is me now. Winter. Not because I hate the world, because I finally learned seasons. I learned that everything does not deserve permanent summer. Some people need distance. Some relationships need death. Some doors need to freeze shut. Some versions of you should never be resurrected. The old me is one of them. I miss him sometimes. I miss how easily he trusted. I miss how he could walk into a room without calculating exits. I miss how he believed words. I miss the stupid courage it took to love people before they had proven they were safe. But I would never bring him back. Because I know where that road ends. It ends with a man giving away so much warmth that one day he looks inside himself and finds smoke. No, I survived that once. I will not survive it twice just to prove I have a heart. My heart is not on trial anymore. I know what I am. I know how deeply I can love. I know how loyal I can be. I know how far I will go for someone who stands beside me when the room gets ugly. But I also know this now. Access to that man is a privilege, not a right. You do not get him because you are lonely. You do not get him because we have history. You do not get him because you finally realized what you lost. You get him by being consistent, by being honest when lying would be easier, by staying when there is nothing to gain, by respecting the boundary the first time, instead of testing how many times you can cross it before consequences arrive. That is the price. And if it feels expensive, good. You have no idea what it cost me to build this version. Every boundary is paid for with a betrayal. Every silence was bought with an argument I survived. Every closed door has a name behind it. Every piece of calm sitting inside my chest was purchased with nights I could not breathe, because somebody else had turned my kindness into a weapon against me. So yes, I am cold now. I am colder with my time, colder with my trust, colder with second chances, colder with people who confuse access with ownership, colder with anyone who thinks my love means I will tolerate disrespect. And I will not apologize for it. I apologized enough when I was warm. I apologized for reacting to things that hurt me. I apologized for needing clarity. I apologized for asking questions. I apologized for finally getting tired. Imagine that. A man being destroyed and still worrying whether his pain is inconveniencing the people destroying him. That was warmth without wisdom. Never again. Now if something costs me my peace, I read the price before I buy it. If someone makes me doubt my worth, I do not audition harder. I leave. If respect disappears, so do I. If loyalty becomes one-sided, I stop carrying both ends. If someone only remembers my value after I remove my presence, they can remember me from a distance. That is not cruelty. That is arithmetic. I gave too much for too long. Now the numbers have changed. And maybe that makes me harder to love. Fine. I was easy to love when loving me required nothing. I was easy to keep when I had no standards. I was easy to return to when I left the door unlocked. I am not interested in being easy anymore. Easy nearly killed me. Warmth almost killed me. So I became cold, and in the cold, I found something I had lost, trying to keep everybody else comfortable. Myself. Not the polite version. Not the useful version. Not the version who smiles while bleeding. Me. Quiet. Clear. Unapologetic. A man who no longer needs to be chosen because he finally chose himself. A man who no longer fears losing people because he knows the cost of losing himself. A man who does not confuse loneliness with a reason to reopen graves. A man who understands that missing someone is not the same as needing them back. That is the man standing here now. And if you knew me before, maybe he scares you. Maybe you look at him and wonder where the soft man went.
Maybe you think he became cruel. He did not. He became careful. There is a difference. Cruelty wants to hurt you. Carefulness simply refuses to let you hurt him again.
So call me distant, call me difficult, call me cold. I have been called worse by people who did worse. Your words do not reach the places they used to. That is what the winter did. It sealed the cracks, and behind those walls, the last good parts of me are still alive. Stronger now, quieter, protected, waiting for the rare people who know that warmth is not something you consume. It is something you protect when someone trusts you enough to share it. Until then, I would rather be winter. I would rather walk alone in the cold than burn myself alive keeping the wrong people warm. I would rather be misunderstood than used. I would rather be called heartless than hand my heart back to hands that already proved they could drop it. I became cold because warmth almost killed me, and I will never apologize for surviving the fire by becoming winter.